Have you ever given a movie recommendation to a friend, only for it to completely flop? I've been there. When I first saw American Beauty a few years ago, I thought it was a brilliant movie, and I had a good reason to. When it first came out in 1999, it won 5 Academy Awards at the Oscars. So, thinking it's this brilliant movie, I recently recommended it to a college friend. This was his reaction. Couldn't finish this. Too gross. Turns out, people hate this movie. Critics have done a 180 on American Beauty in the over 25 years since it's been released. Now, instead of handing it 5 trophies at an awards show, they say things about it like, worst best picture of the modern era. What this proves is that depending on the time and the context, the same work of art can either be considered one of the best produced that year or one of the worst in history. Questions about art are revealed when we see differences of interpretation. What is art's purpose? What can it reveal? When art provokes disgust or controversy, what does that mean? Can a work of art ever be so hateable that we should censor it? Oscar Wilde wrote that it is the spectator and not life who art really mirrors. Wilde's words ring true when the same work of art is censored for wildly different reasons across the centuries. Cases of art censorship have lessons for us that extend beyond the art world and into our national politics and the boundaries of expression on university campuses. If you think you're against censorship, you're probably not. Today, I'm going to explain why. My history research looks at the Inquisition in 18th century Spain. To thread the needle of art censorship during this time period and beyond, I want to explore the shifting reasons for the censorship of Francisco de Goya's Maja Desnuda with you. The Maja Desnuda was first painted in 1797 on the orders of the Prime Minister of Spain, Manuel Godoy. At this time, under the Inquisition, even biblically inspired religious art was subject to censorship by the Catholic Church, with works that displayed nudity or heterodox ideas, facing scrutiny, confiscation, trial, and sometimes destruction. Goya's Maja Desnuda, as you can clearly see, was not remotely biblical. So, Goya knew he was taking a risk, and so did Godoy. So much so that Godoy had Goya produce an alternative, clothed version, the Maja Vestida, to cover her up. When Goya's Majas were first painted, they represented intellectual freedom, artistic liberty, and domestic, Spanish opposition to the Inquisition's religious norms. And all of this was led by none other than the Prime Minister of Spain himself. Godoy was a huge patron of the arts, and he dedicated himself to protecting artworks that would have otherwise been condemned to the pyre by the Inquisition. He hung the Majas inside his gabinete interior, or inner cabinet, and the secrecy with which he shielded them reflected their transgressive theme. The Maja Desnuda was similar to the Velázquez and Titian depictions of Venus in the Room, but more radical by nature, since it contained no mythological framing to excuse the nudity it depicted. However, Godoy and his cabinet could not protect these works forever. In the 19th century, Godoy brokered a deal with Napoleon to allow French troops to pass through Spain in order to attack Portugal. But once the French came into Spain, they never left. Angry Spaniards mutinied, forcing Godoy into exile and blaming him for the new French occupation. The French brought with them their Enlightenment visions of progress, and they abolished the Inquisition. But in 1813, after the French finally left, the Inquisition was reestablished, reasserting Spanish identity, getting rid of French influence, and exposing French sympathizers became its central goal. Godoy's former art collection, with its connotations of French libertinism, Enlightenment, and occupation, was promptly investigated. In 1815, as the former Prime Minister Godoy lay exiled in France, the former court painter Francisco de Goya received a summons from the secret chamber of the Inquisition in Madrid, requesting that he testify as to whether two works, the Maja Vestida and the Maja Desnuda, were his work, why he painted them, who commissioned them, and for what purpose. Despite a passing reference to the nudity of the Maja in the letter ordering Goya's deposition, the Inquisition file seemed mostly concerned with questions of national loyalty. Godoy had been one of Goya's biggest patrons, and after the French occupation, this made Goya suspect. The Inquisition wanted to know, how did Goya conduct himself during this time? Did he busy himself with his painting, looking upon the invasion with horror, or did he profit from the invading government and display its insignia? While nudity provided an official reason for a religious Inquisition tribunal, it is clear that Goya had become suspect more for his association with Godoy, a reputed traitor. So, the first time this painting is censored, we see a mirror, reflecting shifting anxieties. Once, in the eyes of censors, these paintings would have been boiled down to religious blasphemy. But now, they were simplified into representing treason. Unfortunately for Goya and his Majas, the story doesn't end in Goya's lifetime. Rather, the censorial saga continues, and much closer to home, here in Pennsylvania, at the doorstep of the 21st century. On November 7th, 1991, a memo circulated at Penn State Schuylkill, announcing it had come to the attention of the Affirmative Action Office that one of the art reproductions hanging in room C203, Goya's Maja Desnuda, could contribute to a chilly climate in that classroom, and thus be in violation of the law concerning sexual harassment. The reasoning, according to the logic of the memo, was that the artwork was being displayed in a classroom rather than in a gallery or museum setting, which supposedly would have allowed visitors to be more prepared for such a work. What the memo didn't mention is that the artwork was purchased over a decade earlier for an art history course, taught in that same classroom. Surely, administrators didn't mean to imply that a recognized artwork couldn't be taught in class. Or did they? This wasn't the first time that Goya's Maja had been targeted at PSU Schuylkill. Until the fall of 1991, instructor Paul Miller had refused requests from administrators to remove the work, citing censorship as his chief concern. When the censors at PSU Schuylkill finally won out, it led not only to the removal and censorship of Goya's image, but the rest of the art in the room along with it. They also took down Raphael's Madonna of the Chair, Bronzino's Portrait of a Young Man, a Van Ruysdael landscape, Wheatfields, and even a religious painting by Perugino. Now, eventually, all of these works were allowed to resurface. They were placed high on the wall in a spare room in the Student Center, which received a new, hastily taped sign reading, "Gallery, to forewarn students there was art in the room." The moral panic which precipitated such an intervention, and which a painting was essentially accused of sexual harassment, demonstrates the skewed campus speech norms we have today, which camouflage old-fashioned censorship and the modern language of social progress. How did we get here? How is it that the same image, once censored in the name of nationalism, and before that, hidden away from religious extremism, ends up censored again, this time in the name of social progressivism? How is it that some of the same people today who consider themselves open-minded, against book banning, and presumably against censorship, literally relaunched an old Inquisition? There's another piece of artwork from the Spanish Prime Minister Godoy's collection which has been attacked across the centuries. Velázquez's The Rokeby Venus was stabbed by a suffragette in the 20th century, who slashed its canvas with a meat cleaver. And just recently, it was attacked by climate activists with Just Stop Oil, who broke the painting's protective glass using hammers. Now, these political causes are easy to get behind. But today, I'd ask you to consider the artwork being attacked. We lose something when we simplify art into a bumper sticker, viewing it as nothing more than a pawn in struggles over religion, politics, and identity. Being against censorship is about making space to allow art to reveal something greater than ourselves, our religion, our politics, our identity. Fighting censorship is not about having personal sympathies with the content in question. It is about universal principles. The Maha Desnuda demonstrates the paradox at the heart of censorship. Censors think their cause is moral, and often, people who think they're against censorship only want to stick up for work that they think is moral too. But morals change. And when we censor others, we hand over precedent for others to censor ourselves. The Maha Desnuda demonstrates that moralism kills pluralism. If you were to the left and think it is only those on the right who censor, look at the Maha and recall how identity politics led to it being banned from a college classroom. If you consider yourself a right-winger and think it's only those on the left who censor, look at the Maha and remember how it has been embattled by religious and nationalist forces throughout its history. If we let it, art can do more than simply confirm our allegiances. Art can inspire debates, and through its reflections, art can involve us in a process of discovering, testing, and evaluating social and cultural values. Above all, art can be beautiful. Art possesses the ability to provoke emotional reactions, stimulate the senses, and change our minds. All we have to do is open our eyes and dare to look.